one of my, I guess, most often requested videos. And it is also one of the most controversial. So, this is something that I have kind of resisted having an official comment on because there's so many different variables concerned. And, depending on who and where you are in this equation, it can be almost actually a very emotional topic, a very heated topic. But today I am going to wade right into the middle of it as I have now there and gathered some information and have some opinions. So without further ado, let's talk about ADUs. Hey everyone, this is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. I am thrilled to be coming to you live from our beautiful studio here in Santa Ana, California. ADUs are a very, very hot topic. Those who own houses and property, have been kind of asking me a bunch of questions about whether or not I feel like this is worth them looking into. Even people who just do renovations and try to like fix and flip properties are asking questions about it. And then finally, there's a lot of people who have very strong feelings against ADUs. They have been very, it's been a very controversial topic, both in communities and politically as well, because while arguably they bring down the cost of rentals, it also increases the value of homes, on to go out and purchase. And, it sort of like in some ways it kind of widens the divide between the haves and the have-nots. On top of that, it is potentially not worth all the investment and all of the headaches. And then finally, some people are just so abusive with them and so take advantage of the rules around them that those abuses are spilling over into affecting their neighbors and their communities at large. The first thing we're going to talk about here is an ADU controversy going on right now down in San Diego, the city of San Diego. And conversations like this are happening all over the state, have been happening over the last few years. This video is dated June 16th, 2025. So this is a relatively recent discussion. And I can tell you, as a resident here in Orange County and a former resident in Los Angeles County, it is, equally divisive in all of these different areas. There was a story recently of a home where they had built 7 ADUs in their backyard, and it just caused a massive uproar. I don't know exactly what the zoning situation was there that allowed this to happen, but basically they took a bunch of those prefab like shipping container homes and started stacking them up in their backyard and calling them ADUs. And, it is, it can be really, really tough. I mean, like we're talking about 7 times more parking on the street. We're talking about, one group of people spent, let's say, $1 million or $1.5 million to live in a neighborhood, expecting that, their public services would be a certain way, that their schools would be a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. And now all of a sudden, here are these additional units that are popping up that are a lot less expensive. And, those the residents of those units are able to now, go to the same schools, use the same public services, things like that. So that's kind of one category of the kind of the controversy against them. On the other side is, legitimate like apartment building developers and things like that. The kind of the really old school developers are basically saying, hey, it's not fair that here in California, everyone basically gets a free ADU in their backyard. Like here's a group of people who have to spend, typically hundreds of thousands of dollars in many years to develop an apartment building. And, instead there's, a bunch of people just like throwing cheap apartments into their backyards, and it makes it more difficult for developers to thrive. And then finally, there's the developers like this one over here, also in San Diego, where it is a formal developer who got together, who came up with a plan for a 136 unit ADU project. And this is something that has gotten very, very hotly debated and very political. Let's see, this one's from August 4th, 2025. And so it is just something where like I understand both sides of this kind of face of the conversation, which is that on the one hand we have renters who are really, really desperate in need of affordable rents. And I do believe in development. I believe in higher density. I believe overall in urbanization. But because urbanization can be so difficult, the state and a bunch of individual cities basically thought, hey, okay, instead of dealing with the controversies of new apartment buildings, why don't we just basically create a whole new branch of development that's deeply unregulated, or at least underregulated? Which that can be tough, because say what you will about big new apartment building developments, they need to go to multiple meetings with the city, multiple meetings with the neighborhood. They need to meet certain requirements for parking. They need to meet all sorts of different rules for how high it can be, how wide it can be, whether or not it can block someone else's view. They need to, if they're going to be going into a street that was not meant for that level of density, the developer often ends up needing to pay to widen the streets, improve the infrastructure, add more electricity, add more internet. Like the cities have a lot of tools, especially big, powerful cities like Los Angeles have a lot of tools to be able to force developers to, pay to improve the infrastructure as part of the development. But with the ADUs, it's more of a gray area. I'm not going to say it's never works out in a balanced way. I'd say the vast majority of ADU development is pretty peaceful and smart and respectful and all that. But there are some, as these examples would show, that are trying to abuse the flexibility of the rules for massive profits. And that as we know, that mix of variables it's rarely to the benefit of local communities, or existing local communities at least. So yeah, all right, but that's kind of an extreme case. These are all kind of covering the extreme cases that aren't really what most of the people are asking me about, right? Like most of the people who are asking me about this are individual homeowners who are just trying to figure out, okay, is this a profitable endeavor for me to take on? Is this a good way to house hack? And, let's talk a little bit more about that. But I talk about all the political controversy because the political controversies and all of kind of the permitting things that have to do with that impact the expense and complexity of every individual person that's trying to do this for themselves. It kind of the typical story of like, it only takes one a-hole to ruin it for everybody else. And essentially kind of the reason why I've labeled this video ADUs are the worst is because for the most part, those bad actors have come and partially ruined this one for everybody else. Let's talk a little bit about, this is a really cool company that I like called Diggs, ADU Diggs, Diggs. I heard them speak at a real estate convention a couple years ago, and just I was really, really blown away by how they are really doing everything, as far as I can tell, like the right way. They've got these beautiful modular homes that she's talking about right here that, rather than just being sort of like one size fits all or one style fits all, prefab that just kind of gets plunked into people's backyard, like those kind of industrial shipping containers. These are made in a number of trims, like Spanish style, Craftsman style, colonial style, etc., that are, really easy to then tailor to an individual neighborhood. And so, whatever style your house is, they can find one that matches your style. And then rather than have to deal with really lengthy permitting, really lengthy construction, all the risks of not knowing exactly how much something's going to cost and whether or not there's going to be change orders along the way, or whether an inspection is going to go wrong and then everything's going to have to change. These are designed to be, as kind of low effort and low stress as possible. They go in really fast. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are cheaper. I want to emphasize that, a lot of people seem to think that, prefabricated automatically means cheaper. And so far, what I've kind of seen in the marketplace is the prefab people do a pretty good job of kind of matching right about how much it would cost to, build from scratch. So I don't like to say that it's like a more cost-effective method, although, overall it does tend to be on the lower end of the cost spectrum. But I do like to say that it is the lower risk method. You know exactly what you're getting. You can go to a showroom somewhere and walk into a ADU and really feel like, oh, okay, yeah, this is exactly what's going to be in my backyard, and it's no surprises there. The other path is to build from scratch. I went to visit this company. They're called Pacific West. They are located in Encino, and basically, I got kind of picked up on a cold call to see if they could, build one of these in our backyard, and that just kind of got me thinking. I was like, you know what? I have been meaning to do a video on ADUs for over a year, maybe a couple years at this point. And, yeah, why not? Like, I will suffer the 4 hours of bad traffic in and out of the valley in LA, so that I can deliver to you guys the freshest information possible on, how, like the pros and cons of ADUs and whether or not you should install one. And, one of the things that, you will learn about if you kind of follow ADU digs, or, if you talk to someone at Pacific West, is that it's like you can't really do much with the cost of an ADU. ADUs build the same amount of money it costs to build any residential real estate pretty much anywhere in the country. They all kind of fall within a range of about $350 to $650 per square foot. So anytime you have something that's between, like your standard suburban style, like 1 to 2 levels, pretty standard, like middle class trim and fixtures and things like that. Yeah, we're looking at about $350 to $650 per square foot. $350 being like really bare bones, basic, to $650 being all luxury finishes, all the finest appliances and fixtures and like all that stuff. Very, very fancy. Which part of that price range you are inclined to get into really depends on your specific situation, the neighborhood that you're in. One of the things that I would, recommend that you guys look into. Well, all right. So let's kind of take this one step at a time. First of all, you need to determine what is your home's zoning, and basically, figure out based on your zoning, what or how many ADUs can you actually install. So just for example, this is the LA County Planning Department, and here they just kind of get into ADUs, and you can kind of see some examples of different styles of ADUs, right? They're talking about, okay, what if you add an ADU that is attached versus an ADU that is not attached. This one's the ADU that is not attached. And this one is a garage to ADU expansion with like a little addition. Like, let's say this is typically what you would do if you were to add, let's say, a bathroom addition onto your garage and then turn that whole thing into an ADU. If you look back on the photo that I opened with, this was the idea of what if you basically tear down your garage and then build a new 2-car garage with a 1-bedroom apartment on top of it. And then this one also includes a junior ADU. This may not necessarily apply to every jurisdiction. This is basically like, so different municipalities will have different rules about, what counts as an ADU versus what counts as a junior ADU versus what counts as a full entire unit. And, I don't quote me on this. I'm not a professional architect, but, my understanding is that it really comes down to your kitchen. Believe it or not, when you try to define what is the difference between a whole new unit versus just an accessory dwelling unit, a big part of that is kitchen. So they define a kitchen as having a range and a stove, an oven combo, which is the reason why, if you really look closely, most ADUs do not have stoves. They just have like a little cooktop. There's these newer designs where they have like countertops with a built-in electric stove. So it's not technically a range per, California state regulations, but, it will function in practice like a stove for the person that's living there. So yeah, so if you've like shopped around, at least like, ADUs as rentals versus, or if you've, looked into houses that have so-called mother-in-law suites, you will often find that the fully legal permitted mother-in-law suites do not actually have full stoves. Whereas oftentimes if it's like an illegal addition, they don't care. So they throw in a full stove in there. But yeah, weird. Just comes down to the stove. I don't really fully understand that myself. If there are any architects in my audience that would like to fill in the details or explain where I'm wrong, I'm please feel free to write those down in the comments. This last one, they just give just a quick little mention of this. But this is about multifamily residences. So let's say your zoning is not just single family. What if you are zoned R2? That is a very, very special circumstance and adds a lot of value to your house. The house that I owned in Los Angeles on West Boulevard, one of the things that drew me to buying that house was the fact that it was on a fairly large lot and it was zoned R2. And while I never really planned on doing anything with this myself, because, I just wanted to just live in my house and just enjoy it. But I knew that someday a developer was going to look at my lot and think, you know what? I'm going to either tear this whole thing down or do a really substantial construction in the backyard to add an additional unit plus an ADU. And so basically what they're kind of talking about here is the fact that, you can go from just one house to 3, actually. You can add multiple ADUs onto an appropriately zoned lot. And so that's what I assume was happening in that, in those circumstances down in San Diego County, though they must be a lot more flexible to be able to build like many ADUs. But in LA, it comes down to, typically for most projects that I've seen, or at least proposals that I've seen for like very creative fix and flips, is to find an R2 zoned single family residence, and then use that zoning to buy a second basically full house in the backyard, plus like 1 or 2 additional ADUs on top of that. Basically just really, really maximize out the entire lot with as many units as possible. And depending on the type of developer and the amount of money they have, that can either turn into something that's actually really quite luxurious and cool, like a whole bunch of different bungalows and really interesting communal space that they might resell even as a tenants in common type situation, or it could end up being an absolute mess, and someone ends up kind of house hacking their way into just being a slumlord in a neighborhood that is already struggling enough. So a lot of it depends on the intentions and the I guess the overall kind of care and compassion of the landlord or investor that is involved in this situation. All right. Is it worth it for you? I'm going to assume for the purpose of this conversation, and apologies for like flying through a bunch of like lingo and kind of strategy terms pretty quickly. But I guess the only thing I really need to define here is, so sometimes, you can have multiple accessory dwelling units or like a full unit, or tenants in common, or TICs, is like another way of setting up the sale where you actually have multiple purchasers of a single property. So let's say, there's like 4 friends want to buy one house together. And so they cut it up into a bunch of different units and ADUs, and then they all basically pool their money together to buy it. And then they all own the property together on the same title with very with divided interests in the property. So that's called tenants in common. And it's I keep expecting that to catch on more, but there's a lot of political pushback on that for kind of all the same things that involve ADUs that we've already talked about. Okay, all right, pardon. So we are, let's see. So here we're on Redfin, and let's assume that you're living in my old neighborhood here in West Adams. Okay. We are going to look for just basically any house. You just kind of click on any house. You kind of see, all right, let's see, does this, is this about the same size and shape as my house or whatever? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Looks pretty good. And then what we're going to look at is we want to look at the price per square foot, 691, right? Let's go back over here. Let's go over on this side of La Brea. Let's see. Usually those are a little bit less expensive per square. Oh no, more expensive. $739 a square foot. Okay, all right, pretty good. Here we go. And so you kind of like look around your neighborhood and sort of decide. Now we got to look at just like single family homes, right? You kind of look at this, you just sort of look to see, oh, okay, all right, another 16. You might want to make a little spreadsheet, kind of write these all down, and just kind of take an average of it, making sure to stay within homes that are about the same lot size and square footage as your house. And what you're looking for is you want to look at what that price per square foot is, because that tells you how much profit or loss you might have when you build your ADU. Okay, so let's say that that your ADU, or you suspect your ADU that you're thinking about building is probably going to be, let's kind of put it right in the middle, $450 per square foot. Well, it seems like if you're building this in mid-city Los Angeles, the odds of you getting a loss on that investment is very, very low. Like pretty much everything in Los Angeles is going to be in a very similar price range per square foot, which means that if you're only spending $450 per square foot and the real estate there sells for $600 or $700, then when it's time for you to sell your house, you're going to be able to profit by the difference between that 450 and let's call it 650. So let's say you build a 1,000 square foot ADU, and you are building you're building a 1,000 square foot ADU for $450 a square foot, right? So it's like $450K to build it. But when it's time for you to sell the house, adding 1,000 square feet to your house allows you to be able to sell it roughly for, $200,000 more than you put in. So that's just kind of like super duper rough math. You would ideally also want to look at other homes that have ADUs on them and see, how much the price per square foot, maybe drops. Because like it doesn't just sort of stay at the high level forever, right? It may drop a little bit, compress a little bit when you sell it, but typically not like a crazy amount. But anyway, so you kind of click around, you try to figure out sort of like get a really clear idea of what your before numbers and your after numbers are, and then that tells you, okay, is it worthwhile for me to do this? Now let's contrast that to, let's say you live out in the suburbs. And, you're clicking around here and you're thinking, okay, all right, let's see. I'm thinking about building that 1,000 square foot ADU in the backyard of this house. Beautiful house, very nice. Let's see, this one is $500 a square foot. Okay, that starts to be pretty close to the line. If you're building for $450 and you at best you would sell for $500 a square foot, now maybe you're not so sure if that's going to be profitable for you. Let me see if I can find one that's on a much larger lot or just sort of in a different price category. Anyway, like some of these, like I can tell you, are going to be sort of below that line. So this is $558 per square foot. There's houses in Chino that are, more in the 400s. Right, per square foot. And so that starts to, really kind of like scrape that line of whether or not it's worth it. At least from a resale value perspective. According to, like a really smart, legitimate contractor like Pacific West, they will tell you, hey, listen, if you're buying an ADU out in the suburbs, odds are you are better off just basically selling your house and just buying a bigger house, right? That adding this ADU into your backyard, it is, at least in the short term, going to be most likely just a wash. And, which is fine if it's something you want to do as like a lifestyle thing. Like, let's say you have a mother-in-law that you want to move into your backyard, or if you have, kids or grandkids that, want to move in and everybody's getting too crowded in their house and you want to build an ADU in the backyard for them. As a lifestyle choice, this makes a lot of sense, right? Even if it doesn't necessarily, even if it's not a slam dunk investment, it could be a good choice for you where you are in life right now. And that is completely fine. But yeah, just from a purely financial perspective, if you are like in a denser urban area like Los Angeles or in one of the super in-demand areas of Orange County or like along the beach somewhere, it's almost certainly a profitable endeavor to build an ADU, even if you're just doing like a quick fix and flip. And then kind of the further and further out into the suburbs you go, the more it sort of becomes a matter of taste or preference. Okay, let's talk about whether or not it would be profitable. Okay, here I would recommend looking at local listings for rent and just kind of take a look at like, okay, how much is a one bedroom, or two bedroom, two bath, or whatever you're thinking of building in your backyard. You want to look at that square footage. You want to look at it. You want to see, hey, does my backyard really compete with the amenities of a full apartment building like this? And if not, how can I compete or whatever? You want to really look at that and kind of think very seriously about how much rent your property can earn for you. And this is one where, again, in the city, the rents are so high that chances are the amount of rent will be able to cover your loan payments for the ADU, assuming that you are purchasing the ADU with financing. Which is a whole other conversation entirely. Like, well, let's see, before we get to that. So basically, you would want to get an estimate for how much it'll cost to build the ADU, get a loan estimate to see how much your monthly payments would be for financing it, and then compare that against the potential base rents in your area to see whether or not it would end up being a profitable endeavor. I would tell you that at the current costs of construction and the amount of rents in Southern California right now, I would not say that this is a big cash flow endeavor. Again, I would say that it's more of a lifestyle thing than a investing thing. Like if pretty much anyone were to ask me, hey, would you recommend I take $500,000 and put it into a unit in my backyard? Would that make more money for me and be less risk and less of a sacrifice than putting that money into anything else? Man, I would most likely, if it was purely just for money, if it was not for family or friends or whatever, overall I would say that you're better off using that money to buy a nice vacation home somewhere or invest with me out of state in Ohio, right? Like with $500,000 I can buy 5 houses in Ohio that will for sure cash flow way more than just like a single 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in your backyard or over your garage, right? On top of the fact that when you do that, you are sacrificing your backyard or your garage in order to do that, and that's just not a necessary sacrifice. But yeah, that kind of brings me back to this question of like the financing, because like really what it ultimately comes back to is, can I make my financing affordable for this? Because let's say that you don't have $500K all cash, right? Like let's say you have, just kind of a more, I guess, normal amount of savings, like $50,000 to $100,000, and it's interest rates are high, so you're not thinking about like upgrading the size of your to selling your house and moving to a bigger house or anything like that. But you have this money and you're thinking, okay, how do I really make this go the distance? Follow again ADU Digs if you want to learn about some of the latest. There's a lot of state subsidies and a lot of financing options out there right now, because overall the inclination in the marketplace is that people do want cheaper apartments and lower rents. And the way that a lot of municipalities have reacted to this is by trying to make ADUs easier and more affordable, right? Like the cases where people are kind of revolting against ADUs tend to be more kind of specialized cases, usually along beach cities where, I don't know, they get mad about all sorts of density increases there. But, in most places, they're more open to ADUs and actually actively trying to support them with cheaper permits or, trying to get you, better financing deals. What Pacific West did that is extraordinarily clever is they discovered that there is a type of loan that is becoming very popular right now, and that has a lot of legislative support and so a lot of funding, and banks give it fairly easily. Is basically they're called green loans. Basically, it's trying to make homes more energy efficient. And it just so happens that, let's say you are taking advantage of this loan to upgrade all of your windows and doors and upgrade your heating and cooling system and redo your roof with solar panels and newer insulating materials and things like that to make your house more energy efficient. Well, along the way, if you were to also build a energy efficient ADU in your backyard, well, that can all fit under one loan. And so this ends up, for a lot of their clients, ends up being a massive, massive win-win, right? Not only are you, let's say, eliminating your, few $100s a month worth of electricity and gas expenses and things like that from greater energy efficiency, but you are also producing this extra square footage that could add to your value, or bring in revenue of, let's say, a couple $1,000s a month, or to probably about $3,000 a month, depending on where you live. And now all of a sudden it's a slam dunk financial decision. Again, I wouldn't necessarily do this if you're planning to sell and move within the next couple years, but if you're planning to stay in your home for the next, I'd say at least 5 to 10 years, it starts to become a very, very financially appealing proposition. And if you're planning to stay for more than a decade, it's almost for sure a way to add a lot of value, bring in a lot of income, create a lot of flexibility for your living situation. Like, let's say, worst comes to worst, you can live in the ADU and rent out the main house for big money, or sell it with a tenant in place. All of a sudden you have all these options that you didn't have before. And again, barring comparison to investing out in the desert or up in the mountains or even out of state, in Ohio, if you want to keep your real estate investing, both literally and figuratively, in your backyard, this is a really, really smart way to do it. So, as with a lot of things with real estate, sometimes it's not about the investment itself. It's about the financial strategies around it and the kind of some of the lending opportunities around it. If those are affordable loans, it can turn a mediocre investment into an absolute brilliant investment that can completely change your life. So, all right, that is the ADU presentation. If you guys have any questions about this, please feel free to enter them, write those into the comments below, or shoot me a direct message on whichever platform you are watching this on. I am very, very active on social media. I answer all comments, all questions, all messages. So please do reach out and ask. And perhaps next week on my next live video, I will even answer your questions live on the air, so that other people can learn from your curiosities as well. I am live every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So, you can always count on this time. If you want to, engage with me directly and send little questions, I can keep an eye on the chat. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Richard Wayland, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest anywhere in Southern California or Ohio, please give us a call. You can find us at imaginationbroker.com, as well as all the different social media platforms: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can just find us at the Imagination Brokerage. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you next Wednesday.